All right, we are live. So for those listening at home, welcome to the Live from the Sword Coast podcast. My name is Kevin Madison, and this is entry 30, 30 in the series of videos I'm doing for RPG A Day event, or sorry, for the RPG A Day event for 2017. If it's the first of the videos that you're watching, then this is an exercise where every day we are answering different questions relating to role-playing games and so forth. For the month of August 2017. As you can see, so my place is a bit of a disaster right now because I am in the midst of moving. In 2 days, I'm moving to a new place, 2 days at the time of the recording. So I have not had a lot of time to think about today's question. So I'm going to kind of just see what I come up with on the fly here, which is probably how I've done most of my videos for this one as well. So today's question is, what is an RPG genre mashup you would most like to see? And I was thinking about this, and I've got a bit of kind of mixed feelings on genre mashup games. And I think of it I guess in the sense that like 2/3, if you had 3 given days in a row, 2 of those days I'll love genre mashups, and 1 of the days it'll piss me off or it'll irritate me. But I started thinking about some of the genre mashup games that I enjoy and that I've run. Like if you peruse my channel, you'll find that there's a couple genre mashup adventures that I've run, including like recently I ran a Six Guns and Sorcery kind of Old West with magic adventure. And I've run a pulp with magic adventure before too. I've run Shadowrun recently. Shadowrun, of course, is a mashup of kind of like Tolkien fantasy with dystopian cyberpunk elements. And I guess so I mean, obviously, I'm a fan of that kind of material, but I find sometimes that I have as a DM at least, I struggle with what I'm going to do with genre mashup games, because I find it harder to pick what the focus, what the tone is going to be. And that's not always necessarily, because sometimes if things have are sufficiently blended that it doesn't feel like a mashup, it feels like its own unique thing. And I'm thinking of D&D's Eberron setting is I think a good example there. It's a noir pulp kind of setting that features all the things that you would consider signature elements of Dungeons and Dragons. It has there's a space in the world for every one of the monsters that exist. All the classes are there. The same type of exploration, role playing, and combat that you find in Dungeons and Dragons is present in Eberron, but it's put through a really great and interesting noir or pulp lens. So it plays more, I don't know, it plays very uniquely, but it doesn't feel like a mashup. It feels like its own thing. Shadowrun, on the other hand, I alternate between really enjoying the setting and really thinking it's cool, and then having no clue what I'm going to do with it. And the reason is because I think the inherent silliness of mashing up a Tolkien fantasy with what's trying to be a very grounded and realistic world. Like the setting, if you're not familiar with Shadowrun, it is a game set, depending on what edition you're buying, set between 2050 and about 81 or 82. So it's set in the not too distant future. The game features a lot of the sci-fi elements you'd find in a near future game. So there's cyber technology, there's decking, there's advanced computers there, and then it also introduces magic. So there are fantasy races like dwarves and elves and orcs and trolls, and there's spellcasters, and it's a pretty good, like, I shouldn't say it's a pretty good, it's a really good game. Like it's got a lot of really great ideas. It's one of my favorite settings from any role-playing game. And the game itself is, for the most part, pretty good. I think that the recent edition is probably the most mechanically strong, but I feel like it's got just too many fucking moving parts in it to make it, for me, something that I would want to run on an ongoing basis. Now, the reason I say that game, I find the genre mashup is a little, it doesn't hold up sometimes when I think about it, is because in that particular game, for instance, they use the metahumans, characters who are non-human, so elves, dwarves, orcs, trolls, and then a bunch of subvariants from that. They use them as to sort of as an analogy, or as an analogy, as a stand-in for minorities. So for minority groups like folks, gay or visible minorities. They are sort of, there's a discrimination element to Shadowrun that sort of plays up that trope, I guess, or that concept, which is interesting, because it's cool that they're trying to incorporate something like that. But then, you have these very serious and heavy tones that sort of also then hit up against the fact that, it's elves and trolls, like it isn't elves and trolls and orcs and whatnot that are, and dwarves that are emerging from myth. They're emerging from Tolkien and Tolkien-inspired role-playing games. It's as if Dungeons and Dragons had somehow inspired the collective unconsciousness to have magic express itself that way. And they don't ever say that. Like they, excuse me, the sort of in-game conceit is that these creatures have just emerged because they were there before and we just forgot about them. And it's silly. I find if you stop and think about it too much, it's silly. And that's where if I'm trying to run something where I'm going to have an elf activist or elf rights activist or, those things, I find that that genre mashup just doesn't hold together terribly well, and they feel like two different parts. And the trouble I've always had with Shadowrun is that I'm not sure what I want to do with it. Like I'm not interested in running just a game where the characters are playing Shadowrunners who go out and take jobs and whatever else, because that strikes me as kind of being criminals for a lot of it. And you're being criminals, and I'm not really interested in running that kind of game. So I've always run something different. I've a bunch of times used the concept of this thing called the Draco Foundation, which is it's a foundation that was established following the death of a dragon who had successfully run for the presidency of the United Canadian and American States, which was great. I'm talking about this, I'm getting excited about it again too, but there's also it's so goddamn silly that I have a hard time trying to maintain any kind of semblance of I don't know, seriousness or whatnot. Not seriousness. I just have a hard time taking it seriously, is what it is. It's not that I can't establish seriousness at the table on them. It's that I can't take it seriously. So I have a hard time running that in an ongoing campaign. So that's an example of a genre mashup game where I feel like it's just is kind of silly. Another one is Deadlands. Deadlands is a really cool Weird West mashup game. It's got great ideas for characters. And same thing with Shadowrun, great ideas for characters. And I've run Deadlands before, but the default setting in that is actually not horrible. I shouldn't say it. Deadlands itself I don't mind, because there's a divergence in Deadlands from a certain point during the American Civil War where then the timeline changes. So that's fine. But there's a second version of Deadlands, which is the Wasted West. It's like a post-apocalyptic game, but that one assumes that there was a continuing on where there was separate Confederate and American states leading up to this eventual war. And I don't remember offhand, and my books are all packed up right now, but I think actually it was a war between the two of them is what led to this atomic wasteland that you adventure in. And the thing I have an issue with that is just that it's so silly. Like the setting itself leading up to the apocalypse is just so silly, because there's still goofy, advanced technology, and I just don't buy that there would, I don't buy that there would be these two separate Americas leading up to a certain point. So to to start seeing, I guess, the seams between the two genres, between the magic and the historical, and it makes me, I don't know, it makes me less inclined to run it. So that's sort of my perspective on I'm trying to think if there's other genre mashup games that I've run lately that I really enjoyed. I thought of one earlier today, but to be honest, I cannot think of it right now. And unfortunately, normally what I would do is go to my shelf and refresh my memory. But you see, my shelf is currently awaiting movers tomorrow. So unfortunately, I cannot actually reference my books right now. But yeah, I mean, I guess so. That's my sort of mixed feeling with respect to genre mashups. I think it can absolutely work, and obviously, I mean, like I love a lot. I love reading and thinking about some of these settings. So I don't find there's enough there for me to sink my teeth into. And obviously, like there's a lot of stuff about a lot of role-playing games that is inherently silly, and I recognize that this is my hang-up about running these games, but for whatever reason, I just don't find, if I wanted to run a discrimination kind of story or something that was featuring that in, say, Eberron, I wouldn't feel as silly about it as I do running a discrimination, thing. It just, I guess that's the thing, is I think that because of the silliness of the mashups, I find any efforts to, if it's not done well, I find efforts to try and treat them with any kind of gravity is ultimately unsuccessful. I think it's just because it's such a silly thing. It to me, it has the effort of trivializing the issue you're dealing with, or the more mature issue you might be trying to tackle in your adventure or game or setting, rather than doing it the justice that it should do. Again, I'm not saying that's always necessarily the case with these mashups. It's just that that's one of the sillier bits, and I guess that to me brings me out of the setting, which is where, like, the way I describe Shadowrun to friends is that 2 out of 3 days I love it, and then there's that third day where I'm just like, this is so fucking silly, and those are the days that are enough to skew my interest in running a campaign there. So in terms of what I would like to see, though, we're blessed to live in a time where, like, almost any obscure idea has been explored to the nth degree. This isn't, and maybe this is cheating for this question, because it's asking what I would like to see, but I haven't had a chance to dive into Starfinder at great length yet. And the more that I look at that, the more I'm really interested in the setting. I think that the idea of combining D&D sort of fantasy, or D&D style fantasy with a sci-fi setting, they seem to come up with a really interesting way of making it its own thing, and that intrigues me. I think that seems really interesting. I think there's a lot of neat ideas that you could. It provides a neat framework in which you could run some really interesting adventures. I think it also, successful genre mashups, I think, also allow you to take pretty much any idea and run it through that lens. Like there's almost any idea I can come up with from sci-fi down to back through time to a medieval kind of fantasy thing, I can fit in Eberron. There's those concepts. I can generally take the concept for an adventure or for an NPC or for a item or for an encounter, and make that work in the Eberron setting, because Eberron is that accommodating. I get the sense that that's sort of the same thing with Starfinder as well too. I can really, there are some very unique things that make the setting its own, and I feel like I could take whatever tone I want for it and run it through that without making it feel terribly silly. Now, one of the things I think that makes me feel that way is that they're currently, at least at the time of recording, the core book and the first adventure are the only things that are out. The Alien Archive, I think it's called, is coming out next month. maybe it's 2 months. I think it's October of 2017. But in any event, so there's very few books out right now. But the perspective that it offers on the game right now seems to be putting an emphasis on races other than your typical fantasy races. So while they do have stats for playing the sort of D&D core races, the dwarves, elves, half-orcs, gnomes, and I think that's it. I don't know if halflings are even in the core book. But anyway, for playing those core races, there are rules for doing that. If you want to walk before you run into from Pathfinder into Starfinder. But their choice to have as their core races a bunch of either races that were sort of D-lister races in Pathfinder or that didn't exist in Pathfinder is a really great one. I think a really clever way of making it a really unique thing. So that's, I guess, my answer is my answer is the RPG genre mashup that I'm most interested in seeing is I want to see what they're going to do with Starfinder. The first adventure, to be honest, did not blow my socks off. I'm not really interested in running it at all. But I mean, I'm looking forward to seeing what the Alien Archive has to say. A lot of the organizations and the sort of societies that they've set up in the core book seem really interesting and seem brimming with ideas. And again, it does, I think, the thing that a successful genre mashup does, which is it gives you a much broader canvas on which to tell your stories rather than making you lean towards one or the other. And I think that it will have playing that game will have a feel all its own, where in an unsuccessful genre mashup, you're sort of teetering between things. I guess, one final comment, not that I intend this to just be shitting on Shadowrun, but one of the things I find most interesting about Shadowrun is the magic stuff, the magic rules, the magic sort of meta plot. I love that stuff. I think it's really, really great. The magic system is one of the most interesting magic systems and cohesive systems of any role-playing game that's been published. Trouble is if you've got characters or players who are playing characters who aren't really into that stuff, they don't really have a lot to do if you're playing in that field. So I think that one of the things that it becomes a challenge sometimes for genre mashups is to let everything sort of have its feel. To let both elements or all the different flavors, I guess, of what you put together come out in your actual game. So anyway, I think that's probably all I've got to say about the genre mashups. Tomorrow is our final day of this exercise, and tomorrow we're going to be looking ahead because the question is, what do you anticipate most for gaming in 2018? Now, this is only wrapping up the third quarter, going into fourth quarter of. Not even. We're still in third quarter of 2017. So I think what I'll do is I'll talk tomorrow about what I'm planning to do or looking forward to for the rest of 2017, and as well looking forward to what I'm excited to explore in the coming year as well. So as always, if you have any questions, concerns, or comments regarding this, please do not hesitate to leave a comment in the section below, and I will endeavor to respond. Otherwise, thank you very much for watching the video, and I hope you enjoyed the series and this video as well. And I will look forward to seeing you tomorrow.